My name is Derek Mosley. I am the director of Marquette Law School's Lubar Center for Public Policy Research and Civic Education. And I want to welcome you all here today to our Get to Know program. We do this type of programming to bring people in, both locally and nationally, to talk about issues, to learn more about themselves, and to talk about what they do to affect our lives every day. We are happy for this program today because we have a new face here at Marquette Law School. But just last week, 65,000 Milwaukee kids left their houses and ventured down the street to one of 156 Milwaukee Public Schools. And they were embarking on a new educational journey, but at the same time, MPS had a brand new director as well. Because in March of 2025, Dr. Brenda Cassellius, who's here with us today, was named the superintendent of the largest school district in the state of Wisconsin. And when she came and inherited some issues.
No.
She inherited withholding of state money due to missed deadlines, some financial mismanagement, a lead paint crisis, not to mention most recently a severe flood problem as a result of the rain that we got last month. But it is my pleasure to welcome you to Marquette Law School. Could you give a round of applause to our guest, Dr. Brenda Cassellius?
Thank you.
So, Dr. Cassellius, my first question for you is, you grew up in Minneapolis.
I did.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your parents and about where you grew up, things like that.
Oh, well, I have kind of an interesting story. So I grew up to two really wonderful people who loved me very much. I say I grew up in poverty, but I never had a poverty of love from both of my parents, even though my father was not in my life for much of it. He was still very much a part of it, and his expectations for me was a big part of it. And I grew up knowing his parents, my grandparents. I think I've spent time with my grandparents maybe once or twice in my entire life, but I knew of their legacy. Both of my grandparents were African American and teachers, educators. My grandfather was Melvin Alston. You can look him up since it's law. I figured I'd bring this up as kind of my birth story. And he in 1939 was the president of the Negro Teachers Union. And he fought for black teachers to get the same pay as white teachers in 1939. They lost the first case, but then the NAACP got hold of it. And there was this young lawyer there who was very
Howard University Law School.
Yes, a young lawyer there who came and met with my grandfather and said, "I want to take up your case." And that was Thurgood Marshall. And so, it's in my blood. And my grandmother was also an educator. My grandfather went on to be dean of a college in Florida A&M University, historically black university college. And my grandmother was the first African-American woman to be appointed by Governor Askew in Florida to the Leon County School Board. So I have that kind of grounding in who I am as a person, even though I didn't spend a lot of time with them, because my father, who was the salutatorian of his class, his twin sister was valedictorian of the class, went to the University of Minnesota to get his education because my grandmother had gotten, I think it was her doctorate from the University of Minnesota. Could have been her master's, I can't remember exactly. But she went to the University of Minnesota as well. And so he went north from Tallahassee to go to school, met my mother, who was already a single mother at 16. Lebanese mother, and she had my sister, who's 4 years older than me, and my sister's Caucasian, so a very blended family. And my mother came from a very poor family who lived in the southeast projects of Minneapolis, 11 children to this family, and my grandfather was a flower peddler. And so I would peddle flowers on the street corner and in bars to help make money for the family. This was after my father and mother separated, so was living in the projects as well during that time. I'll tell you, before Loving happened, this wasn't okay in every community for Black and white mixed biracial marriages to happen. And so, he got a full ride scholarship to the University of Minnesota to be on the football team because he was a really good football player and also very smart, obviously as the salutatorian of his class. But the coach at the time, was not liking the relationship and said that he had a choice. And so my dad quit school and went into enlisted into the Air Force for the Vietnam War. And at that time, was in Tokyo for 2 years. So my first 2 years of life were in Tokyo. My dad was doing Russian intelligence because he was fluent in Russian. And so then the relationship didn't work out between my parents at that time. My mother ended up back into public housing. My father was trying to be an airline pilot at the time because he always wanted to fly and wasn't allowed to fly in the Air Force. I don't really know why, but I think he always felt there was something there with the race. And so he had to get his hours, 10,000 hours to become a commercial airline pilot. And he was one of the first commercial airline pilots, African-American commercial airline pilots. He worked for Braniff first and then US Air. When he first got his first Braniff Airlines, the parents tried to come back together again and make it work, and it didn't work again. So there was this on and off relationship for that. Fast forward, I was always a really good student. My dad did pay me for my grades, even though it was a really little bit amount of, I did get paid for my grades. So I had that little bit of incentive and extra push, but I intrinsically wanted to be a good student anyways. And so then went to college.
And you went to college in Minnesota, correct?
I did.
You had a scholarship.
I did have a full scholarship to Gustavus Adolphus College. And hardships are part of your life, right? And so you deal with hardships and then you move on from them. But at Gustavus Adolphus College, I was city girl going to a rural Catholic college, and first time I'd ever done that. And I went to get eyeglasses because I couldn't see the board very well. And I was followed by a car of 3 white boys who were calling me racial things and saying bad things and scared me very badly. So I left that full ride scholarship and enrolled at the University of Minnesota the following semester. But that was really great. And then went to the University of Minnesota, was with my friends, and loved going to college and doing all those things, and felt very comfortable in a more diverse setting for myself. That felt safer for me and more comfortable because I had family in Minneapolis. So then,
What'd you study in
so
college?
in college, I was pre-med, because you're always chasing the money when you're young, right? And and I was, pretty smart and confident back in the day, So I really, really enjoyed learning, and I wanted to know how the brain worked and how did humans really learn. And I'm very interested in human behavior. So my grandmother was a professor of psychology, and so I was just interested in psychology too because she did it. And I didn't know my grandmother personally very well, like seeing her and that sort of thing, but I knew of her.
Yep.
So I talk about talk about the story because you never know what impact you have on the lives of children just when you tell your own stories and your legacies. And so I think that that's really important. And so studied to be a teacher when I went back because I knew that was really my heart. I was from educators. I loved working with children. I was very fortunate when I was younger. Yes, I grew up in the projects. Yes, I sold flowers on the street corners. But I had wonderful mentors out in the park and rec programs. I was a Head Start baby. So, the early 70s was the war on poverty, right? And it was the time when all of these social programs were knitted so well together. And I was just so incredibly fortunate to have park and rec programs. A bookmobile that came in the library and who gave me the Harold and the Purple Crayon book for the first time. And I could draw my whole imaginary story of where I wanted to go, even though I couldn't go there. I could see it, with that book. And I would sit in this groovy kind of van. Because remember back in the day when you were in a big, what did they, like a UV, what do they call those vans? No, it was bigger than that. They were like the bigger. It wasn't a bus, but it was like a bigger, like an RV.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was like it had carpeting.
Oh
in
yeah,
it.
yeah.
You know, you could like go up.
I was
the little,
told not to go to those vans.
Yeah. By the way, you ever see that T-shirt now that people are wearing that says, "I asked for the candy first. I'm not stupid," before I got in the van or something? It's funny, but anyway, so, and then I had great teachers. My kindergarten teacher was incredibly impactful to me, and my love of learning. And my preschool teachers were incredible at the Head Start program that was just down the way. I had great athletic coaches. I'm an athlete, so I really enjoyed.
Favorite sport?
Well, I think people probably know hockey.
You're from Minnesota.
I'm from Minnesota. It's the hockey state. So my kids played hockey, so then I picked up hockey at age 42, and I've played amateur women's hockey since age 42 now. So it's just great. I was actually talking to my former sister-in-law today, and she wished me a happy birthday. And so I was able to say, yeah, I think I'm going to try to get to a couple games this winter there and play. So that'll be fun. But yeah, so I had great teachers. My kindergarten teacher used to circle us around, and at the end of the day, and we'd be sitting there in a little circle, all sweet. And I remember this so vividly. And she'd have a little wand, and if you were good and you did everything you were supposed to do, she'd put the little wand on your head, and it would light up, and you would just like, oh. And you thought it was so much magic, right? That this wand was lighting up, and really, she had a button on the side. But you didn't know that as a kid. You just thought it was like magic because you were so good that day. So I think I'll buy 68,000 wands, make sure that.
Now you kind of left a little bit out. So while you were doing all of this, at night, you got your master's at night,
Yeah,
correct?
so in college, I had my son at 21. I was a single mother. My dad was not happy about that, as you can imagine, because he had big, high hopes for me and, thought that, I might just be a statistic, he would say, so he was really angry, and he actually disowned me during that 9 months of pregnancy because he thought I was making the wrong choice. But for me, that was the right choice at that time. And so, but finished school still within 4 years. Here I am 9 months with my belly out here, but I loved being a mother, and it wasn't going to slow me down. And he's 36 now. Love him. He's my biggest accomplishment ever. So I was a single mom for 10 years. And during that time, I went back to school. In Minnesota, you had to have your master's degree to teach high school. So I got my master's degree. Sometimes I would bring my little baby carrier with me to the class out in the evenings. So he'd come with me. And then I got my first teaching job at Saturn School for Tomorrow.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so that was great. And before that, I'd always worked. So I had the also opportunity to be a camp counselor, which was awesome. And so that's when I really learned my love for children and children who are most vulnerable, and giving back. And so that's really where it came from. And then I worked at St. Joseph's Home for Abused and Neglected Children. And then I was a paraprofessional working as they called it a child technician, working with level 5 students. It's like the students who had the most vulnerable needs for emotional behavior disturbed. And I don't like disturbed, but like students who are really struggling with their behavior. And so I worked at a school called Harrison Secondary. It's in Minneapolis. It was a self-contained school for kids who had significant complex needs. And that's how I got my start in education. And then I went over to Saturn School for Tomorrow. I was recruited by an African-American principal.
Now, this is what I want to bring up, because when I do these types of get-to-knows,
Yeah.
I always like to pinpoint people who had an effect on people. And so there was someone by the name of Dolores Henderson
Oh, man,
who
Dolores
had an
was-
effect on your life. Can you tell us who Dolores was?
Dolores was like an amazing educator, still is. I think she's still she's so feisty. I would get down here and show how she would walk in the halls, but probably shouldn't. But she would just be stomping. She had her eyelashes, and she was just this amazing educator. And so she came and observed me 3 times. I was in my internship at the time for my teaching, getting my practicum in, and she came and observed me 3 times. and then asked me in the middle of my I was doing a year internship, and she came and said, I want you to teach this class. And it was a class of naughty kids, middle school kids, many of which I'm still friends with, and one of whom, he wasn't in that class, but he was part of that class with the school that was next to it. He's now the mayor of St. Paul. So, I was able to create a relationship with that class that was just incredibly special. So she had me there, and there's several students that I still mentor today from that class. But she was a big contributing factor. And then Dr. Carol Johnson, who
was my next person,
yes,
absolutely.
she is another African-American woman, amazing, amazing educator, one of the best superintendents in the nation. She has been an incredible impact on my life. So I taught for 4 years, and then I became an assistant principal for 9 years. And because I was young looking all the time, now it's starting to catch up with me. But, before, I was so young looking and really didn't look the part. And it was still, I think there was still some discrimination against women in the workforce, which there is still today, right? And I was obviously as a Black woman, and I was leading at the middle and high school level. We had 7 high schools in Minneapolis Public Schools, and about that in St. Paul. I'm not sure if it was 6 or 7. They were mostly held by white men at the time, and some women were in there as well, but not a lot of women of color. Carol Johnson was a Black woman superintendent in Minneapolis Public Schools, and she hired me there in Minneapolis to work at Washburn High School. And then I'd been 9 years in, just waiting for my opportunity to finally be able to lead a school. So she went to Memphis, Tennessee to be superintendent of the 17th largest school district, asked me to come with her mid-year to just kind of help her because the school district was in corrective action. And the middle schools were a disaster. There were 31 middle schools. They were absolutely a disaster. I think 14 were in state corrective action. 17 had issues with attendance. They still had corporal punishment in Memphis at the time. Huge suspension rates, lots of issues with academic achievement in the district. And so I came in, started working just as kind of an assistant for her. And I worked and did the Title I plan for the district. Started to help her with the corrective action plan for the district, and then she asked me to start looking at some ideas with the middle school, meet with some middle school principals while she was building out her team, and I'm waiting for the school year to start when I finally get my school, like I can go turn around one of these schools. I was so excited, and be a principal finally for the first time, and I think I was like 35 or 36, I can't even remember. And so she comes to me one day in my office and sits me down and she says, I've been doing all of this interviewing for middle school superintendent to come in and turn around these middle schools, and I think I'm looking right at the person I want to choose. And I said, are you crazy? There's just no way that I'm going to be able to do this, Carol. I never said Carol then. I do now because we're so close. But Dr. Johnson, you've got to be crazy. She goes, you've been sitting here, you've done this, you've done this, you've done this. And I think that you can do this and you can lead it. And the middle school principals really see you as a colleague, and I want you to do it. She said, just make sure that you humble yourself into the position because some of these folks have been, this is the South, this is in the North, very different. She said, so, you got to respect your elders, you got to humble yourself into this position and really learn. So I read every leadership book there was, so I was starting to study all that, convened all of the principals together, and then we created what was called the Concept Council. So I shifted them into regions. So there was 6 different regions, or 5 different, I can't remember, 5 or 6 different regions led by an experienced principal who would then lead that core of principals, 5 other principals. So there's one leader and then the other 5 principals, and then I convened that one principal into what I called the Concept Council with some of our curriculum specialists. That was what was needed. I am still chasing that team today. I think I might have built it now in Milwaukee, but an incredible team of school leaders who were able to go from 31 of our schools, 27 were not making adequate yearly progress, 14 in corrective action. Within 4 years, we had only 4 that were not making AYP. And we were able to raise for our special ed students 43 percentage points in reading, 22 percentage points for our students in closed gaps. So we were on fire.
Awesome. That's awesome.
we were recognized nationally, spoke at the National Press Club, the National Middle School Association did an article, I wrote an article, we were on ABC News. It was like, it was all happening because of these inspired principals, because the work happens with your school leaders. They're the ones who build the community, who feed the teachers, who set the culture, who meet the students every day, and then they make sure that the resources are there for and advocate for. And if we hadn't had such great partnerships to have such incredible work done by our school leaders, we worked with our universities on assistant principal preparation for the principalship. I think we replaced like 22 of the 31 principals. Just inspired, amazing leaders who knew instruction, weren't making excuses, were supporting one another. They cared more about all 31 schools than they did about the achievement of just their one school. They were that embedded. And you could talk to any one of them today. Many of them now are superintendents or working at the district. Matter of fact, Rod Richmond is now the superintendent of Memphis City Schools, was one of the principals that served with me. He is an amazing individual, and he knows that recipe for making sure and turning around schools and what you do. So that was an incredible growing experience in Memphis. I had the wonderful opportunity to learn from Carol.
But you didn't stay.
I didn't stay in Memphis, no, because I was growing and went back, and Carol went to Boston. Oh, okay. So I had the opportunity to go back home to Minneapolis, and I went back to Minneapolis, where I became high school superintendent. And always you always want to see your home community thrive, right? And so I wanted to go back there and so I did some high school redesign. So I was over the middle and high schools there and alternative schools. We were able to take all of our students off of the yellow buses, improve our ozone layer over Minneapolis, and have kids on the city bus, which was great. That's one of the things we did, as well as put International Baccalaureate in all but one high school, which is great, able to bring the International Baccalaureate Career Certificate Program to all of, not to all, but to like two or three of our schools. And now I think it's in all of the Minneapolis schools. So that's a program that works on career tech ed and career pathways for students who are not maybe gonna go directly into college, but maybe to a technical school. And then I got my first superintendency at East Metro Integration District. Always, as a biracial woman, wanting to work on racial conciliation, work on racial issues, desegregation, and it's always been just something that I really believe in terms of my incredible purpose that God put me on the earth for. And so got to East Metro Integration District and loved it. I got to work with 10 superintendents around a desegregation effort and give parents the opportunity to send their kids to more diverse schools and then work on equity training for teachers. And so we did a lot of professional development. 6 months later, I get a call from Governor Mark Dayton's chief of staff, Tina Smith, who's now Senator Smith in Minnesota. And she says, the governor would like to talk to you about becoming commissioner of education. I'm like, how did I get on a short list? Tina, they call her the Velvet Hammer. So she's like, well, if you're not interested, we got other people we can talk to. I'm like, okay, no. I mean, I can talk to you about it, but I'm not sure I'm interested, because I had already gotten a call because I guess the governor, well, this is one thing to know about Mark Dayton is he, really wanted a team of practitioners in his cabinet, not political appointees, because he wanted to do the work of real Minnesotans. And so he wanted people who were personable, who would go out, who would know the work, and that he wouldn't have to train anybody up so that the advice he was getting as governor would be good advice, right? And he trusted us, and we were such a really awesome team. So fast forward, I was there 8 years with Governor Mark Dayton as his chief advisor. We don't have a state board of education, there's just me and him making the policy with the legislature, right? First 2 years, fully Republican. Second 2 years, trifecta of fully Democratic. And that's when we got confirmed because, the Republicans weren't going to confirm any of the governor's cabinet at the time. So got confirmed then. And then the third 2 years were split, I believe. And it was was Republican in the House, and the Senate was Democrat, and then the last 2 years was fully Republican again. What I learned from that was that you have to be able to get along with everybody, and that everybody has good ideas, regardless. Everybody has good ideas when you can find common purpose and you can move together. And so you have to be willing to work through the really difficult things to find the consensus on the things that you can, and then be okay with that being progress. So the governor would always say, no one of us is as smart as all of us. And he would say that all voices count, and he would say that every single legislator had to knock on doors and get elected, so we are going to respect them because they are the decision makers that the people of Minnesota have chosen to represent them.
Absolutely.
And so you must work with them regardless of party. And so that's the one thing I learned and I love about him, is that I try to take off all of these other labels we have for people and get to the good ideas and let the bad ideas just kind of fall to the side.
Absolutely.
But you didn't stay there either.
No, because I think I was probably the only cabinet member who was like, the governor would call me like his shiny penny, and the cabinet member would call me the shiny penny because I was always asking for more money for kids. Well, he would always say that he's going to try to strive toward 50% for all kids of any surplus, because it's our kids that need it, and then the rest go to the elderly and the sick. So he just had such an incredible moral compass that it was so easy to work for him. And when he started to have some health problems, I was also advising, spend the rest of your life. I mean, the guy's billionaire, it's like, or millionaire, whatever. And he had dedicated his entire life to public service. And so why not enjoy some of it while you're still healthy, and
Absolutely.
can. And so
Boston comes knocking.
he decided not to, and so then I get a call from Mayor Walsh, in Boston, and I know what it's like to, work with an executive in government, right? And so I enjoyed that with Mark for 8 years, and being able to really effect change on a broad and big scale, for the entire state of Minnesota, 1 million kids, right? To be able to have the governor's pen and to be able to go down to the House and the Senate and negotiate deals for kids was pretty cool. I didn't think I'd stay all 8 years because, it's not a super lucrative job either, you know what I mean? So not compared to what all other superintendents were making across the nation. And so, but I didn't care, it was about the kids, and it was about getting the work done for them, and working really with a boss who really gave me just about everything that I wanted to do for kids that we could within our means, right? And so...
When you got to Boston, though,
The mayor who wanted you left.
Yes, I know. It was such a bummer because we were doing such great things when we first started. So got to Boston.
That didn't even mention COVID. I'll get to that.
We'll get to that because that was another whole deal. So I'm, get to the job, and I'm starting to have community meetings, talking with folks about what we need in our schools. They're very much like Milwaukee schools, quite honestly. They're older schools. It's the oldest school district in the nation. They were peeling paint and no air conditioning, and they didn't have gymnasiums and nursing stations. They didn't have nurses in the schools. They didn't have social workers and counselors. So I went to the mayor and I said, well, first of all, I went to my CFO and said, I'm going to go ask the mayor for $100 million. And he's like, you're crazy, right? You'll be lucky if you get 10. I said, don't you worry about what I'm going to ask for. You just write down my proposal, and let's just get it going. And he said, well, you're not going to get it, so don't be disappointed when you don't get it. So then I had my meeting with the mayor, and I'm like, I need $100 million. I'm going to tell you, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, and then we have to go after a bond because we need to start bonding for our buildings because these buildings are old. This is the oldest district. I said, when's the last time you walked these floors of our schools? He goes, I'm in the schools all the time. And I said, and you're okay with it? And I said, one, they were dirty, and I wouldn't send my own kids there. So why would we expect other parents to send their kids to our schools? So he gave me money, I think it was $10 million to get the water, the clean water in our buildings because we didn't have clean water coming into our building. We were actually trucking in bottled water every single day to our buildings. And then I met with our chief custodial engineer who said they didn't have night supervisors, they didn't have enough custodial staff, And that was one of the first things he did, was give me additional like supervisors and custodial staff so we could clean the buildings, right? Get them maintained and get them properly in order for our kiddos. And then I said, and I need this other $100 million because we need to put in social workers and counselors and nurses, which was amazing that we did that and had that gift, because just 6 months later, COVID happened. Imagine if we didn't do that and we didn't have nurses and social workers and counselors in our school buildings to support our kiddos. So I just feel incredibly grateful for Mayor Walsh and his commitment to giving us every resource that we needed for our kids. But it took me telling him what the community was telling me they needed for their kids. And so then we got that, and then COVID hit, and that just kind of changed everything. You know, one, my style of leadership is collaborative. You know, it is to include everybody.
And your ally went to the Biden administration.
Well, even before that, though, we had like, I can't even remember, I think it was General Mc somebody came in, and like we were dealing with a public health crisis that we had not ever dealt with before. And it was command and control, right? Which was completely out of my leadership style, to have to try to now shift and pivot to command and control when people were expecting this, you know, collaboration and you know, you get a voice in this. Like, we had different barking orders from the federal government, barking orders from the state. The city was you know, the actual authorities over the health for the city. So make decisions about when we're going to close school, how we're going to deliver education, how we're going to deliver millions of meals to our families. And we weren't just going to deliver meals just to our Boston Public Schools kids. Like, he had mayoral control, so we had to provide services to the whole community, right, and to the whole city. So it was like a huge lift, getting technology and getting all of those things in place. Yes, we made some mistakes. It was rushed. It was hard and tiring for a year. Sure. You know, the union and, you know, we were going back and forth, and they were making threats, and we were just trying to get the teachers to open up school for special ed kids. Like, just for our special ed kids, you know, I need you guys to show up. So there were those differences and challenges, but you just deal with those challenges as you get them, and you pick yourself back up, and you do your best that you could do every single day for kiddos, and move forward. And then
you left again.
And then no,
you
but before that,
again.
he left me. So I had 3 mayors and 3 board chairs in 3 years during a pandemic. And navigating those pieces while we were also taking on one of the biggest third rails in all of Boston, which is changing admission criteria for the exam schools. So I don't know if you all know, Boston Latin School is the oldest public school in the nation and the best public school in the nation. Very selective high school, and we had to change the admissions criteria because of COVID, because we couldn't take a test. So we changed it, we based it on zip code, hugely controversial, and then we did another working group around the second policy, which then included test scores, but also was a much more equitable policy based on census information to ensure that all students across the city had equal access to the exam schools, which they did not before. Went all the way to the Supreme Court. We had 3 legal challenges, all the way to the Supreme Court, vacated it, and it still stands today. So, but that was a hard thing for the community to accept, that I pushed through.
Sure.
So I think that was hard for the current mayor to politically have to deal with, just to be honest, you know, in this room.
No.
But we worked together. So Mayor Wu and I worked together before I left on a $2 billion bond for our school buildings and to green new schools. And I have a great relationship with her. But I was also just ready to move on at that point. I had done my work in Boston.
Yeah, and you moved on.
I did.
Out of education.
I did.
Where'd you go?
I went to Fresh Energy, which was a nonprofit, and it got me back to my policy roots and back into the legislature, advocating for climate change policies, which I really care deeply about, as I talked about with the bus situation in Minneapolis. You know, I have children of my own, and I want them to inherit a planet that is healthy and they can breathe. And is sustainable and we don't all burn up, you know. I enjoy the lakes of Minnesota and now Wisconsin, and I want to see us be able to still continue to have these wonderful, beautiful earth for our kiddos. So it was really something that I believe strongly in and did for 2 years, but
It came back to
it just kept nagging at me that I had to get back into schools working directly with children. And I told my board chair, Minneapolis came knocking at my door when they had an opening. And I was only a year into my job at Fresh Energy, and we're right in the smack of strategic planning. I called my board chair and said, they're asking me to, you know, put my name in the hat, and it's my hometown, you know. And she said, please don't do that. So I didn't, because I'm also very loyal. And so I stayed for another year, but I think she knew, and I told her that as soon as the right opportunity opened for me to come back, I would.
And what was that next opportunity?
Well, the next opportunity was really St. Paul Public Schools.
Right.
Yeah, and so, and my sister, who is amazing, and my sister meaning my really good colleague, Stacy Stanley, who's like amazing educator. She got the position and I didn't. She was from the community, grew up at Central High School, went to Central High School. And she's just, if I had known she put her name in that hat, I wouldn't have put my name in that hat for sure. But the true thing about Milwaukee is I looked at Milwaukee in 2018 when I knew the governor wasn't going to run again. But they went internal.
Right.
So it didn't open then for me. And then in 2023, I got a knock to come in as interim, but I'd just taken the job here at Fresh Energy. So I felt like I couldn't leave. And then when they extended it again, after not getting St. Paul, I'm like, well, what is God doing? It's like knocking on this door from Milwaukee. I think I'm supposed to be here. I better obey and get my butt over there.
Plus you have this, you know, MPS, Minneapolis Public Schools, Memphis Public Schools.
Oh, I never even noticed that.
Yeah, sure you didn't.
And just a little bit of BPS. Right. Yes.
And so,
So Milwaukee,
comes calling.
Yes.
and it's, you get hired in March.
I did, yes.
And when you came in, I mentioned earlier, you inherited
A lot of things.
what was the first thing?
That you wanted to tackle.
When you started.
Well, the first thing you ever want to tackle is academic achievement. You know, I really was just floored at and I didn't even think it was real that we could have 90% of our fourth graders not scoring at grade level. And I just like, you can guess better than that. So I just really couldn't believe it. So I really wanted to build a strong team and get in. And then as it got closer through the interview process, I started to hear about this lead thing. And I think that started in like January and February, and it started to kind of pick up steam that it was going to be a bigger problem. And I knew because of my background with facilities that I couldn't handle it, but I didn't know that I was going to have to handle it with the leadership change.
Right.
So that became quite a challenge. And so I'm so thankful and grateful to Mayor Cavalier Johnson, who was just instrumental, took my call at 9:30 and said, I think I'm gonna have to make a leadership change here. And I don't have anybody in the ranks. I've looked at everybody with their license and what they have, and there was just nobody. He said, I'll help out. And so he sent over his chief person on lead. I started working with Mike Tortoritis, the health commissioner, very closely. I worked with Marty Martinez in Boston, the health commissioner. So I already knew those relationships and what it means to leverage a full cabinet. Asked the mayor if I could have a seat on his cabinet. He graciously said, yes, I think we should leverage those resources, as much as we possibly can. I know who my board is, my boss, but the mayor is an ally and a partner, and we gotta leverage the whole community. So I think that's been a very good relationship, and I'm really fortunate to have had the support of the health department in helping to tackle this lead piece.
Yeah, you mentioned something a couple times, and you talked about Boston. I saw that nationally, the average age of schools is about 45 to 49 years. Mm-hmm. But in Milwaukee, it's 85 years or 89 years. Now, so how do we
attack that problem?
We need a 100-year plan. We really need a 100-year plan. I mean, you're talking a huge investment in the infrastructure. Because schools, like just this morning, we were over at Browning School opening up a community center in the Northwest community. So important to that community to be able to have that community center. But schools and community centers should be matched because they're a community asset. You're always going to need buildings. Now, education may change. There may be more AI. There may be more homeschooling. There may be more choice. There may be whatever, but we should be thinking about these buildings as not just schools, but as multi-purpose buildings for the future. And what is the future going to hold for how we convene, how we educate, how we build community and connectedness, and how we share culture and celebrate, each other and humanity. So I think that, today at Browning, this is a good example of what Milwaukee could envision for its future. And then unused buildings when, because unfortunately, Milwaukee Public Schools used to be 120,000 students. We're now sitting at somewhere around 66,000 students. And so we have a pretty big blueprint of buildings. And so we lease them from the city who actually owns them. And so, it's this partnership of what can we do with these buildings to better meet the needs of our full community, for our elderly population, for our community assets, for our children. How do we think and visualize a better future with the assets that we have in terms of our space for children, both external space, play yards, learning spaces, external parks, rec, all of those things that make it really good to be in family and be in community together.
Absolutely. I saw you on the news before school started, walking down the street, knocking on doors.
Yes.
What were you hoping to accomplish with that?
Well, I'm hoping to make sure that parents have the information to enroll their children. A lot of times, families move during the summer or they get disconnected to their school, and I just want to make sure they know that we want to welcome them and we love their children and we want them to be in school. School's the safest place for them, and we have great opportunities for their children, and that attendance matters, so right now we have a little bit of a problem with our high school attendance, so I'm really trying to get our kiddos into our schools and get them connected. We're going to be bringing forward this fall to the board some co-curricular and extracurricular investments that we want to make so that kids can stay connected in school before and after school, with orchestras and theater programs and after-school athletic programs and clubs and things like that for kiddos, because that connectedness and belonging is what helps them want to be there. Math isn't going to get them, But so we have to find those ways to get a more well-rounded education for our children.
And you said something. You said that school's the safest place for them.
Yeah.
And we just had a report in the paper today that due to the violence in the city, that you could staff a whole class of students who were killed a result of gun violence. And you said you've been to Memphis, you've been to Boston and Minneapolis, and you hadn't seen anything like this before.
The frequency, I'm just incredibly saddened by the fact that we have had so many deaths of our children to gun violence, and the fact that there's just not this outcry. I mean, we have lead action groups of parents about lead. I have one student who has been had a case for lead directly to a school. One. And there's outrage, and I'm spending $25 million on schools. And I don't have that similar outrage for these 23 babies.
Absolutely.
It's wrong. They're dead. Their families are grieving. And I'm so grateful to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel for memorializing the lives of these children, because they matter.
Absolutely.
These children mattered. They didn't get an opportunity. Every day they don't get an opportunity. And it's up to every single one of us to make sure that our guns are locked up, and that they get not in the hands of, little kids who think they're being cool, and they hold it up and, unfortunately it goes off, or, their teenagers are in an argument and they don't know how else to settle it but to look cool and to pull the trigger in an instant because their little brains aren't fully developed yet, and these affect their lives for the rest of their lives. And
Absolutely.
It's not just the child who's there no longer with us. It's the family that's impacted for the rest of their lives. It's the community that's impacted. It's the school community that has 1 to 2 or 3 children who die. You know, it's just a lot of trauma that is needless.
Absolutely.
So I'm hoping that we can continue to elevate this issue and find some solutions to coordinate. And I'm not saying there's not efforts out there. There are many of people who are trying. But we have to actually get better results. Like, we need to set clear stake in the sand, you know, that this is not going to be tolerated any longer.
Absolutely. Now, when I started, I said there were a number of problems that the school district was having. One of them was financial mismanagement. What did you do when you first came in to try to tackle that problem?
Well, really, I didn't do much with it right away because I was dealing with lead
Right.
and just trying to make my way and get to know the community. And because the board had given that over to our Office of Accountability and Efficiency at the time. And so they were managing the corrective action plan with the state. So I figured, I don't have to be worried about it because it's being managed by this office. And, you know, they got a new CFO and it's all being managed and we're on time and target. So it's just like getting regular little check-ins. And then when we started to miss the deadlines is when I was like, okay, something's not right. I think I need to be more involved. So then I got more involved, started attending the statewide meetings with the state, started talking to the deputy superintendent at the state office, and started to go, okay, I think I need to be much more involved. So then I got much more involved, moved the finance team up to my office, started to really look at what are the team processes, how can we do process improvement here. I wanted to get embedded with the team, so Memorial Day weekend, I didn't take vacation. I went into and just was embedded with them all weekend to better understand what was the accounting behind it that was getting in the way. And really, these are hardworking people who were trying to manage, a bigger problem, a bigger complex problem than even I understood or the public understands about how these two systems talk to one another between the state and the system that we had. I think that people think maybe there was like some imbalance or something. No, there's no record. That's not a reconciliation of our books or any mismanagement on our side. So our books are correct. It's our control environment around the accounting codes that is the problem, because our account codes were allowed by the state previously to be our account codes and our local codes and their account codes called a woofer code. They didn't talk to one another, so when we would push our data to the state, it would spit it back to us and say an error because their computer codes were not recognizing our account codes. And so we had to create this entire chart of account codes. You can imagine the number of departments, the number of people handling different expenditures, grant expenditures, federal grant expenditures, state grant expenditures, local grant expenditures, referendum money we have to track, all of that in a $1.5 billion organization. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of transactions that are made every single day that have to be balanced and accounted for in a way that can be pushed up to the state so that they can recognize it and do their proper due diligence and auditing. So we had 3 streams of work working, finish the FY24 audit, get that completed, which I can almost say, I think with confidence that we will be done by next week. And we did get we've been giving it back in chunks. There's just this one little chunk that's left, which is the final audit from Baker Tilly. So it's on their side, and I think they're getting really, really close. And then we'll get the last $8 million released. That will release us from corrective action because we were able to already deliver to the state a plan of self-governance with oversight and accountability that is going to keep us in line and restore our personnel, restore the onboarding for the personnel, and the control environment with standard operating protocols. So we'll have all of that in order, and a chart of accounts that speaks to the state, which will be wonderful, and the technologies will speak to one another. Then the second one is the finishing of the FY25 audit, because we just finished 25 school year. So now that audit is due in December. And so we're now on a fast pace to try to get that and meet that deadline. It will be hard to meet it. I just have to be honest, because we just had such problems with the 24 and trying to do the cleanup. But we're going to work our tails off to try to meet that FY25 audit. And then it's building the new system that is fully, fully compliant, where it's seamless with EdFi compliance and interoperability languages that the two systems speak. So when we enter in a budget code, it automatically is recognized by the state. And there's no errors, no cleanup, and the control environment is restored. So I'm like, phew. Well, I'll be happy on that day. I'm hoping that day is like January 1st and we're just in normal operating process. But we'll be then faced with other hard decisions because we've got to cut $100 million. We got to close and merge schools. And so we're looking at our strategic plan and any changes that we need to make based on the governor's audits and the work that we're doing and the community feedback that we've gotten. And so setting that direction. So hopefully we'll be on really good footing.
Good. All right. Oh, I'm going to open it up for any questions. I'm going to see if I can find Hillary. There she is.
Gosh, now you know everything about me. I also have 3 wonderful children. My daughter's an art teacher.
Oh,
She's in her 4th year. And my son is an artist as well as my other one.
Good afternoon. I'm Lee Van Kieboom. I'm the Associate Dean in the College of Education.
Nice to meet you.
Welcome.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask faculty, staff, and the students from the College of Ed, if you're here, would you just stand?
Yay.
So, of course, we've been partnering with Milwaukee Public Schools for many years. Our partnership is deep. And of course, we prepare teachers, educational leaders, community educators for community schools. And we want to welcome you and just ask, how can we continue to support you? And what new ways might we think about partnering together? And of course, I'm hoping that this will be an invitation for another and next meeting with you. But how can we support you? And what might be some new ways to work with MPS?
Well, geez, thank you all for preparing our next generation of teachers. As I said, my daughter is a teacher. I'm so proud of her. I would say that there's nothing more basic for a school superintendent or a school principal than to get a caring and competent teacher in every single classroom, right? And I know that this is controversial. I've been restructuring and moving central office licensed teachers to the classroom because the very first basic thing you can do is make sure you have a permanent licensed educator in the classroom, right? And so you can help me there. So everybody who stood up with your students in your classes, I don't know how many you have, maybe 30 or 20 or how many ever, you say go to Memphis.
The M's.
I know, it's like I'm getting so old now. Go to Milwaukee Public Schools because great things are going to be happening there. You're going to be supported. You're going to be loved, cared for. And I just really want every single teacher coming out of a pre-service assignment to be able to come and get a job at Milwaukee Public Schools. I just hired a new chief of HR, so we're hoping it's not going to take so long to get through our HR screening. I'm planning on early contracts. So they would come, sometime early in like midwinter, hopefully. Before spring, we will be having big hiring fairs and getting to know. So it'd be nice to come over here and work with you and just kind of get to know you. Come over with our union leaders and ourselves and partners and say, here's what we have to offer at Milwaukee Public Schools. Come with us and sign with us, and then we will assign them to schools. So when we do those early contracts, the agreement would be that you come, you don't know what your assignment's going to be, and we will probably assign you to some of the hardest schools because we want some of the most energetic, best teachers to grow, and then we'll support them when they come. That'd be great. Yeah. We also have a Grow Your Own program. I think we're doing that now with Alverno College. So, I mean, if there's ways to plug in and grow those types of things too for our paraprofessionals and help them through the Grow Your Own program too, or particularly, most of our vacancies now, we have about 100 vacancies left still. I was hoping to get to 0. We just couldn't quite do that. Hopefully next year we will be there with these new partnerships, but special education is a really key area for us, particularly our students with autism. It's a extremely challenging situation in supporting some of our students who have autistic behaviors, and so it takes a very specialized and caring person to be able to work with some of our students.
Hi, maybe it's too early for you to answer this, but I'm concerned about the efforts of ICE and deportation efforts. Is that affecting attendance in the schools?
Yeah, so I'm also very concerned, and very concerned about a number of things around the way that education is being portrayed or dismantled with this current administration without making a political statement. I think we can all just agree that some of the policies around education, and particularly universities, that are under attack right now, and public schools as well, K-12, it's just an incredibly disruptive and challenging time, in particular for some of our most vulnerable students. Students who are undocumented, families are scared, and they, of course, have social media, so you can see kind of what's happening out there just to folks who, maybe, are undocumented, and the horrible things that are happening to people, the human atrocities that are happening right now, and injustices. So yes, I think they are afraid, and yes, I do think it's impacting our attendance, and it's impacting our enrollment too. And so we're going to go out and try to share with them our safe haven policies, where, if an ICE agent is coming, they have to come to the district and report, show us their warrant. They can't just go in. So we have protections put in place and process that they have to go through to be able to show us that they have the authority in which to enter our schools.
Thank you, Dr. Cassellius, for coming. My name is Christy Davis, and I'm a retired educator, but I'm also
Thank you.
the chair of a board, a nonprofit, and I've met you briefly because it's Forward Scholars, a reading organization. We teach children to read in kindergarten to third grade who are behind under grade level. I met you because you were in a car driving from one place to another, and we were on a Zoom, and you have been working so hard that even you don't take a break when you're in a car from one place. You weren't driving, fortunately.
Shoo!
I would like to say that I'm never driving when I'm in a Zoom, but that's probably not true. But I'm not actually on video when I'm in a Zoom and driving. I'm just listening.
I'm sure you're not. But I don't want to talk about reading right now. I want to talk about what you've already mentioned, which is attendance. Attendance is an issue, and you've identified that, not just at the high school level, but even in the programs where we work in the elementary schools. And you've been in Memphis, in Minneapolis, in Boston. So what ideas do you have to improve attendance?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did as part of our restructuring too is and this came back actually in our academic audit and our HR audit, is that we're staffed appropriately at the district office. And within the district, we have this right number of staff members comparatively to other Wisconsin school districts and large urban school districts. So we have the right number of people generally. But what we don't have is people in the classroom, right? So we have more administrators, more support staff, but not directly to the classroom. And it was James Comer who said, African-American psychologist, who said that no significant learning happens outside a significant relationship. So the more that you can bring down that number, that staff to student ratio of number, where you have relationships and students have at least one person that they can bond with and care for, that's going to check in with them every day, that's the best thing you can do. The second thing is to have a caring and competent teacher in every single classroom with low class sizes, right? And so why is that important? Because if the teacher has an engaging classroom that has instructional rigor that students want to be at, that they feel fulfilled in, then they'll come to school. The fourth thing is, like, if you can have safe and welcoming schools for families. So I was talking with our union leaders about home visiting programs, and because we had some very strong home visiting programs in St. Paul Public Schools, and it's actually the unions really have started these programs, and community schools and mentor programs like Forward Scholars. You know, when you have those types of connectedness, those types of relationships, a sense of family at a school, you actually end up with students and families wanting to send their kids there, and they feel connected. So it's the home visiting, the making sure parents have the tools. It's about taking away barriers around transportation for families, which is another big barrier for families here because of the way that choice works within our city. You know, that can be a struggle for some families. They don't feel like sending their kid to the school that's closest to them. They'll actually sacrifice and put them on a bus for an hour and a half to send them somewhere else. So I think that, you know, getting to the bottom of that and having high quality schools in every part of your community and your city so that they'll want to go to the closest school is another way to improve attendance. The students tell me get better food. You know, so we have fresh food now in our high schools and our salad bars. Not bar, but we have prepared salads for them now because they said they wanted grab and go rather than a bar because it just takes too long for them to get to the line. So you know, that's one way. Co-curriculars, more team. You know, right now in one of our policies, I don't think we have like an attendance policy right now for our student athletes. And so kids like to play sports, and you know, you should have to attend school regularly to play sports. So I mean, I think there's some tweaks like that we can do to improve attendance. And then finally, you know, with the change in the restructuring for central office staff, you know, we just have more bodies. We moved out a lot of our student support departments to schools, so they office out of our schools now. And so they're not at central office, they're actually housed. Their offices are in our schools. And I think that that's really making a difference in terms of the atmosphere in the school building. Teachers don't feel alone, you know, that, you know, central office is over here and we're over here. No, we're a whole community supporting one another. And so their central office is in service to our schools. And so that's where they're at. So I think those are the things that will make the biggest difference for increasing attendance.
Well, we're at time,
Oh, okay.
and so I want to thank you for being here. If we can give a round of applause to Dr. Cassellius.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for being here today. Hopefully you join us next week. We have another program where we'll have the Consulate General of Trade from Canada, as well as the MMAC will be here, and the Director of the Port to talk about tariffs and how they affect Wisconsin. I also want to give a shout out to our benefactors are in the audience today. Marianne and Shell Lubar are in the front. Thank you both for being here. So please keep an eye out on the emails, and hopefully we see you next week. Thank you for coming.